Welcome. Today I'd like to introduce you to an extraordinary young woman who lived through remarkable times. She played a vital role in facilitating communication between the Indigenous peoples and the British during the formative years of Australia's colonial beginnings. Her name was Boorong. Boorong was born around 1775 and she was the daughter of Burramattagal elder Morgoran and a woman named Gurubera, and she belonged to the Parramatta area of New South Wales. Boorong was about 12 years old when the British arrived in 1788. Boorong means star, but in British journals and letters it was often mispronounced and recorded as Abaru, Arabu, Abaran, Abaru or Buran. In 1789, a devastating smallpox outbreak swept through the Indigenous population. Boorong and a young man, likely her brother, were found with the disease and brought into the colonist camp by Governor Arthur Phillip's men. A captive Darug man named Arabanu cared for them. Boorong recovered, but tragically the young man did not. Believing Boorong to be orphaned, the British placed her in the care of the colony's chaplain, Reverend Richard Johnson. According to Lieutenant General Watkin Tench, she was received as an inmate with great kindness in the family of Mrs. Johnson, the clergyman's wife. Mary Johnson, the chaplain's wife, became a foster mother to Boorong, teaching her English, encouraging her to wear clothes, and helping her learn household duties and English customs. Their relationship is considered the earliest recorded female cross-cultural connection in Australian history. Boorong is also believed to be the first Indigenous Australian to have had a meaningful encounter with Christianity. During her time with the Johnsons, Boorong was introduced to the Bible and the Lord's Prayer. Reverend Johnson wrote, "Have taught her the Lord's Prayer, etc., and as she comes better to understand me, endeavour to instruct her respecting a supreme being." David Blackburn, master of the HMS Supply, wrote to his sister, "The Reverend Mr. Johnson has a fine girl, about 15 years old, Abaru, but little has yet been learned from her, though she is very fond of Mrs. Johnson." After 18 months, Boorong returned to her people. In the only known letter by Mary Johnson, written in 1795, she said, "The native girl that we had is gone into the woods. She pays us a visit now and then, quite naked. They seem to prefer their own way of life." Thanks to her time with the Johnsons, Boorong became a key figure in communication between the Indigenous population and the British, acting as both interpreter and mediator. Reverend Johnson wrote, "We are now upon a pretty friendly intercourse with the natives. This intercourse was principally brought about by means of a little girl." The British, under orders from King George III, were eager to build relationships with the Indigenous people. They wanted information about the land and its resources and hoped to live in amity and kindness with them. But things weren't going as planned. Blackburn wrote, "They will not come among us, though every method has been used to invite them." Governor Phillip blamed the mistrust on French explorer Jean-François de la Perouse, who had reportedly fired on a group of locals at Botany Bay, as well as the behaviour of some unruly convicts. Eventually, Phillip resorted to kidnapping. His goal, according to his journals, was to get one man in his possession who, by kind treatment, might hereafter be the means of disposing his countrymen to place more confidence in us. In other words, Governor Phillip kidnapped an Aboriginal man, hoping that treating him well would build trust with his people. Arabanu, the man who had cared for Boorong, was the first to be taken. Initially, Boorong was considered too young to play a role in reconciliation efforts, but her deep knowledge of language, culture and customs, her ability to speak English, and the unique relationship she had with the Johnsons made her invaluable. She soon became a crucial part of mediations between the British and the local Indigenous communities. In 1790, Governor Phillip was speared at Broken Bay. Lieutenant Watkin Tench later wrote that this incident would lay the foundation for a breakthrough in relations. The attacker fled into the bush, and a shaken governor was rushed back to Government House, where the spear was removed. For a week afterwards, Tench noted, "No communication passed between the natives and us." That changed when Boorong, Reverend Richard Johnson, and Lieutenant William Dawes were travelling by boat and encountered two Darug men. The men asked after the governor and seemed pleased to hear he was likely to recover. Through Boorong's interpretation, they learned that a man named Willie Marin had carried out the attack. The meeting helped ease fears of retaliation among the local tribes. The very next day, a fire was spotted on the North Shore, and a group, including Boorong, was sent to investigate. There they found Bennelong, a former captive and escapee of Governor Phillip, along with others. Watkin Tench wrote that much civility passed between the groups and an arrangement was made to meet again later that afternoon. The British were hoping that Bennelong would return to Sydney, and Boorong was asked to try and persuade Barangaroo, Bennelong's second wife, to come with them, hoping that Bennelong would follow. But Watkin Tench observed, it was soon seen that Barangaroo's arguments to induce Abaru, he means Boorong, to rejoin their society were more powerful than those of the latter to prevail upon her to come among us. Boorong was soon called away and returned to the boat, where she sat, according to Watkin Tench, in sullen silence, evidently occupied by reflection on the scene she had left behind and returning inclination to her former habits of life. She was homesick, in other words. And it's no wonder she was sullen. Boorong had been ridiculed by both the British and her own people for trying to put a petticoat on Barangaroo. And earlier that day, Tench recorded a conversation about finding Boorong a husband, a young man who would be free to travel between Sydney and his people. A 16-year-old named Imarawaney, I hope I got that right, Imirawaney, was suggested, but Boorong was not interested. According to Watkin Tench, she preferred the name of another person who we knew was her favourite. I wonder who that was. Over the next few weeks, the British made several attempts to persuade Bennelong to return to Sydney, but all of them failed. Eventually, though, Bennelong's desire to visit Governor Phillip and to check on his health got the better of him, and he agreed to go. Barangaroo was deeply upset by this decision, so Reverend Johnson and Boorong offered to stay behind with her as hostages until Bennelong returned. Around this time, there's a fascinating entry in Judge Advocate David Collins's journal. He records Boorong assisting in a birth. It's likely that her relationship with Mary Johnson gave a select few British women the rare privilege of witnessing a Burramattagal birth. Collins wrote, "During the time of partition, these people suffer none but females to be present, and from them we learn that during her labour, one female, Boorong, was employed in pouring cold water from time to time on the abdomen. One of the British women was even given the honour of cutting the cord, with the mother's permission. She then washed the baby, something Boorong and the other women objected to. Isn't that interesting?" Collins also recorded two incidents he described as examples of Boorong's superstition. The first was when Boorong believed she'd been made ill by women from another tribe. Naval surgeon John White tried to treat her with bleeding, but it didn't help. So Boorong underwent a traditional ritual known as bianini, a procedure performed exclusively by women involving a different kind of bleeding. Now, I'm not sure if I've said that correctly, and I probably haven't. It might be more like biani. So if you know more about this practice and feel it's appropriate to share, please do so in the comments. Thank you. The second incident was Boorong's reaction to a falling star. She became greatly agitated and prophesying much evil to befall all the white men and their inhabitations. By 1797, Boorong had married Bennelong. Barangaroo had died in 1791, shortly after giving birth to a daughter. Boorong and Bennelong lived around Kissing Point, north of the Parramatta River, along with some of Boorong's brothers and around 100 Indigenous survivors. In 1804, Boorong gave birth to her only known child, a son named Digidigi, also known as Digi. And sadly, in 1813, when Digidigi was just 9 years old, both Boorong and Bennelong are believed to have died of illness. Ship's surgeon, John Arnold, recorded in his journal, "Old Bennelong is dead. Philip told me he died after a short illness about 2 years ago, and that they buried him and his wife at Kissing Point. They were laid to rest together on the estate of convict brewer James Squire." After his parents' death, Digidigi was enrolled at the Parramatta Native Institution. In 1821, he was adopted by Wesleyan minister William Walker, and the following year he was baptised into the Wesleyan Church under the name Thomas Walker Coke. According to historian Dr. Meredith Lake, Digidigi would go on to become the first Indigenous Australian Christian evangelist, and historian Dr. James Harris writes, "Thomas immediately set about evangelising his own people. So Minister Walker baptised him Thomas Coke Walker Bennelong in honour of himself and of Thomas Coke, the superintendent of the Wesleyan missions, who had died en route to Sri Lanka in 1813. Minister William Walker wrote of Digidigi. He wrote, "He learned to read his Bible in about 3 months, and his attention to class and prayer meetings was very great and encouraging, and he collected the young natives of his tribe to whom he gave an exhortation," which means he preached, and which he concluded with a prayer. Boorong's life was one of extraordinary resilience, quiet leadership, and cultural significance. From surviving a devastating epidemic to becoming a trusted interpreter and mediator, she navigated the complexities of 2 worlds with courage and grace. Her story reminds us that history is not only shaped by governors and explorers, but also by young women who carried knowledge, language, and compassion across cultural divides. Boorong's legacy lived on through her son Digidigi, and through the records left behind by those who knew her. Boorong's voice continues to echo across generations. Her story invites us to reflect on the early relationships between Indigenous Australians and settlers, not just the conflicts, but the connections. It offers hope that even in times of upheaval, understanding and respect can take root. And it reminds us of the importance of listening to Indigenous voices, past and present, as we continue to reckon with our shared history. May Boorong's name, meaning star, continue to shine as a symbol of strength, survival, and the enduring power of cultural knowledge.